Hello, welcome to yesterday's Airlines. The beginning of September has brought the first release announcement for September in the form of NG models. They have announced 30 new models. Kind of. A good chunk of them were already announced as future announcements. Obviously, these follow very quickly on the heels of the Phoenix and jcwings announcements right at the end of August, so check out those videos if you haven't seen those already. This month, NG have decreased the number slightly from the month before, which was a very large month, and they've got some new models coming out here that are very different to ones they've done before in terms of liveries and airline, but not necessarily in terms of the aircraft types. And if you are a classic collector like I am, then I imagine you'll still be a little bit disappointed by this bunch, but there is still lots of colour and interest here as well. So I think it really, as always, depends on what it is you actually collect as to how excited you will be by this set. But there are new airlines popping up. Before we get into checking out this set of models, obviously, as always, please like the video if you enjoy it, chuck that on and comment as well. Always like to see what people think of the releases. Also subscribe to the channel and check me out on my other channels at Airlines on Instagram and Facebook, and of course the website yesterdaysairlines.com. Okay, cool. Well, let's get in and look through this bunch of new releases. As has become standard with NG, there are so many models that I want to try and get through this slightly pacier than I do with someone like Gemini, who releases 1/3 as many different models a month, but hopefully there's still value here. Obviously also, NG don't really have any bad molds, so it's not likely there'll be any scrap metals. There may be some gas guzzlers, but not because of the quality of the molds. They are almost universally excellent and almost universally top of the class actually as well. So without mold being an issue, it really comes down to, has the model been made before, how interesting is the airline, and hey, personally, do I think it's a good model? So you got to bear that in mind, obviously, and I don't expect everyone to agree with my suggestions here. We're going to start with the Airbuses, as I always do, and the first up are a pair of A319s. Both of these are Singaporean A319s. We've firstly got one in the colours of Scoot, that's 9V TRA, and then we've got one in the colours of the predecessor, Tiger Air. It's not the first Tiger Air colours, the ones with the actually had a tiger on, but it is the Tiger Air colours that came afterwards, the ones which had this kind of tiger tail made up the G in the Tiger Air. Quite an interesting scheme. Tiger Air as a brand never really seemed to go anywhere. Don't even know if any are around anymore. I think Tiger Air Taiwan might still be about. But anyway, Tiger Air was bought out by Singapore and it was merged into Scoot. So we've got these two A319s. Now the cool thing about these is that they've not been made before. There hasn't been any Scoot A319s at all. There has been a couple of Tiger Air ones, but they're all wearing the previous scheme. It's been made by Phoenix and Aero Classics, but wearing the scheme with the Leaping Tiger, not this scheme. So both of these models are unique, and even though they don't interest me, it's good to see a new area and new ground, and obviously that elevates their status. So I'm going to put these both as high flyer models. They both are pretty interesting. Next up, we've got a Spirit A321 in the yellow taxi colours. It's N660NK. It is not a Neo. This is an A321 CEO. It is similar to the model which was released by Gemini not that many moons ago, back in 2020. So a few moons ago. But actually, it's also similar to, hey, the NG Models version, which was made at the same time, which was N681NK. So I'm really not sure why they're making this one. As far as I can tell, it's exactly the same livery. There's nothing really to see here. I guess the first one must have sold well. Certainly it's better than the Gemini version, but it's effectively the same as the previous NG version. So this one's trying to workhorse, no problems there. that is it for A321 family members this month. And the next aircraft is an A330. It's an A330-700, better known as the Beluga XL. We've got FGXLO. This is the 6th Beluga XL in service, although at least number 6. And it's got a slightly different livery to the others in that the whale is winking. This has been announced by jcwings, but as one of their future releases, it really depends on how much you value the interactive aspect as to whether you prefer the JC or the NG versions. You know, I appreciate that they've both done the mould, and I appreciate why they're making these, but they're not very exciting for me personally. I don't really have a place for them, and fundamentally they're all effectively the same. So even though it is a different reg and a slightly different scheme, I'm going to put this one on workhorse as well. Not particularly exciting for me. I think it does also have some also flying outsized cargo to your destination titles, but yeah, it's not exciting me. Next up does excite me, and this one is another A330, but this one is a Series 200. It's CP3209. It's Boliviana de Aviation. It's the same model that was announced by Phoenix not long ago. Can't remember if it was last month or the month before, but regardless, same model as announced by Phoenix. They're both going to be really nice, and so it's good to have that kind of choice. Personally, I think the NG mold is slightly better than the Phoenix one in detail, but not to a drastic degree. But nonetheless, it's great to see airlines from more diverse countries. You don't get a lot out of Bolivia in 400 scale, and this looks like it'll be really nice. I'm going to put this one into supersonic. It's the sort of model which I'd like to be able to buy, but can't justify. Next up, we've got a couple of Garuda Indonesian A330-300s, PK GPA and PK GPD. Both of them were wearing the cargo colours. They both look like they're passenger to cargo conversions. Yeah, or are they even COVID cargo conversions? I'm not sure, but regardless, they're not very exciting, and they have been made before. jcwings has made both of them, and actually got them out, which is a miracle. They were announced by JC this year, and they're actually both out, so that's, you know, there's competition. Phoenix was also made one of them in 2021, that was PK-GPA, so they have been made before. There are good versions of these around, and how many Garuda A330s do we need? This is kind of the thing, I guess, nowadays with NG. They produce one model of an aircraft airline combo, and you know you're going to get more, and this, you know, is 7th, 8th, they've made 8 now, Garuda A330s in various liveries, admittedly, but nonetheless, yeah, these aren't exciting me. These are both going to go to workhorse. Nothing to see here. And similarly, how many Finnair A350s do we need? Because we've got another couple this month from NG. We've got OH Lima Whiskey Delta and Lima Whiskey Echo. They're both wearing the same scheme, which is, I believe, the Christmas 2017 colours. It's got a reindeer on the back, which is quite nice. But again, it's been made, obviously. It's been made before. It's been made by both Phoenix and jcwings, and JC did a flaps down version. That was back in 2018. So, yeah, do we really need these? And again, they've made lots now. These will be the 6th and 7th Finnair A350s from NG. It's kind of just enough. It just seems like it's just kind of the way to work through it. It's just a bit enough, you know. I'd rather that they moved on to something else and maybe release these versions later, more like JCE in a sense, because it seems every month I'm talking about these, and they're both going to go into workhorse. I'm sure they were really nice models, and they probably will be the best version of these that have been made, but nonetheless, you know, not very exciting. That's it for the Airbuses. So moving on into Boeing territory, and we've got some 737s, and this is where NG has started to produce some new airlines. We've got a couple of Aerolíneas Argentinas 737-800s. The first, actually, in the scale almost. In fact, it's the first in the scale. Nobody else has made any Aerolíneas Argentinas Series 800s. They've made some Max 8s, and they've made some 700s, and obviously Airclass made some 200s, but nobody's made 800s. So the first one is a bit more interesting, I would say. It's LVFVN, and that's wearing the standard scheme, the Condor kind of scheme, which is quite nice. And it's obviously blue and white, and it looks pretty cool. So I think that's going to turn out to be a super nice model, and that's really great. I'll put that one up into Supersonic, I think, because it's unique. No one else has made it. The other one is wearing the freighter colours, and that one, LV CTC, it's not as colourful, and it's a freighter. It's just not quite as interesting for me, more of a niche product, but it's still unique and a little bit unusual. I'll put that one into High Flyer. There's another Series 800 this month, and this one is Chinese. It's China United Airlines. It's wearing a special scheme that features the magnolia plant. It actually is a really attractive scheme. I can know that most people listening to this are not going to be remotely interested in this one, but I think this is really beautiful. It's another example of where China actually produces some really handsome special schemes. They're not all pandas and Pokemon and stuff like that. China produces some really attractive schemes using local destinations and iconic flora and fauna, like in this case the magnolia, and they look really good. China United is, I think it's a low-cost airline nowadays. Originally it spawned out of the Air Force, but it's a subsidiary of Shanghai Airlines, I believe, nowadays. But anyway, China United definitely slap bang in within my collection criteria, and this one looks really good, and it's one that I will hope to acquire. I'm going to put this one in Supersonic. No one else has made it. Good airline. I like to see some slightly more unusual Chinese airlines, and that's grand. And actually there is one more Series 800 this month, and it is not a big surprise. It is Southwest Airlines. And, I've talked before, again, NG really loves Southwest, so it's not surprising. We keep on seeing Southwest Airlines releases, and of the 15 now, 737-800s that have been made for Southwest, NG has made the majority of them. It's made 9 of them. So that's quite amazing. And it's gradually working its way through these state colour versions. This one, N8655 Delta, is wearing the New Mexico 1 scheme, which used to be on a 737-700 back in the olden days. It's going to turn out really nice. It's going to be another great model to add to people's collection, but I'm kind of slightly overseeing so many Southwest releases. So actually, I'm going to put this one in High Flyer, just because I'm a little bit tired of them. It will be a lovely model again. And there are 2 more, 737s, but they're both Maxes. So different mould, but equally as good. The first one up is Airlines. It's wearing the UN gold colours, which is mainly blue, and has been painted also on a 787. The reg is B20CP. This aircraft is one of many Maxes that has been made for Gemin, which has been sitting in storage for quite a long time. Still hasn't got into service, but as I understand it, they have actually started putting their Maxes into service now, so I imagine you will be seeing it. This model has actually been announced by jcwings, and when did they announce it? They announced it in 2020, and it still hasn't been released. So this one's likely to be it, even though it's 3 years later almost. So it'll be a great model. Again, it's right close to the sort of criteria I like. It's quite an attractive scheme. I'll bag and swap in Supersonic as well. And following it into Supersonic is the next model, which is the Malaysia Airlines Max 9M MVA, which we've talked about now in the last 2 videos because it's been announced by jcwings and it's been announced by Phoenix. But this is going to be clearly the best version by some distance, much better than the Phoenix version. And jcwings one's going to take ages to get out because it's a future release. So yeah, if I were you, I'd put my money into this one if I was interested in it. It's a nice scheme. This modified Negaraku, the kite logo on the tail is slightly different, I believe, to the standard, and it looks really nice. So yeah, Supersonic that as well. Okay, now we wander briefly, very briefly, into some classic territory. There's barely any classics this month. In fact, these really are probably the only things that you could, well, there's a couple of Tier 154s. These and the Tier 154s are the only things you could call classic. Everything else isn't, which is frustrating. But hey, at least there are a couple. Unfortunately, they're both effectively the same. We've got 2 747 SPs, both in the colours of Australia, Asia, or AZ, depending on your reading of it. Australia, Asia, which is basically the Qantas subsidiary which they used to be able to fly to Taiwan back when China was being a pain in the bum about airlines flying direct to Taiwan, hence why you've got KLM Asia and you had Japan Asia Airways and various, and British Asia Airways and various others, and this was the Qantas version, Australia, Asia. We've got a couple of SPs here, VHEAA, City of Gold Coast Tweed, and VHEAB, City of Traralgon. Never even heard of that place. They're both exactly the same. Except for that reg aspect, I think, and maybe the logo on the engines. It's very subtle anyway. I'm only going to need one of these, so one of them clearly is going to go into supersonic because, hey, that's what I'm here for, the classics. The other one, though, I'm just going to put in the workhorse. Nobody needs both of them. I would have thought even a hardcore contest collector would struggle to justify getting both. But that's it for classic 747s this month. But the next one is still a 747, just not a classic. It is the first release for the new 747-8 molds. It is the Atlas Air, but before it was painted, it's in those colours, N863 Golf Tango. So it's in the primer. It'll be interesting to see whether NG has modified the mould. They haven't been telling. I know some people are very animated about them modifying it. I still think it's the best 747-8 in the scale without the mods. I think they will have modified some of the smaller details, but I would be very surprised if they've modified the forehead around the cockpit, to be honest. But we'll see. I can't say for certain. I don't know myself. Nobody else has made this primer version of it, so that's quite unique. It is their first 747-8. I'm going to put this one up into supersonic and hope for the best, but it'll be interesting to see what it turns out like. It's a model I'm tempted to get, can't really justify, but I might get just for review purposes. We'll have to see. I'm not entirely sure. And that's it for the jumbos. So now we're moving back into big twin territory, and we've got a selection of 777s. First one up is a British Airways. Another British Airways, you say? Yes, another British Airways. This one's G, Yankee, Mike, Juliet. It's wearing the standard BA scheme, but with the official airline of the England football team stickers on it. I don't think anyone else has made that version of it. So in that sense, it is unique. But obviously we've had quite a few BA 772s recently, not just from NG, though this will be NG 6th, but also from Gemini, who've made standard colours and the one wheel colours in the last few months themselves. So once again, you're kind of overloaded by very similar aircraft, and if you don't collect BA specifically, you're probably a bit over it. I'm going to put this one in high flyer. I am a little bit over seeing this many of them, but it'll be a nice release. It is unique, so there's not really a reason not to. And similarly, you know, when you often wait for a model and then two of them come along at once, it seems to happen quite a bit. And Aviation 400 have literally just announced the United Airlines 777-300ER wearing the Unicon scheme, the post-merger livery. And now NG have done the same. NG's version is N2331 uniform, so different reg. And there'll be an interesting comparison. They've both got great molds, Aviation 400 and NG for the Series 300ER. This one's going to be out before the AV400 version you'd expect. It's only been made previously before by Gemini once on their old seam mold, and that's quite a long time ago, back in 2017. One of the last seamed releases, I guess. And they haven't made it since. They've made three versions of the modern scheme, the current scheme, or they've made one version of the current scheme, sorry, and NG and Aviation 400 have made versions of that too, but nobody has made this again until now with these two announcements in the same month. Can't see any reason not to put this one up in supersonic. Again, doesn't fit my criteria, but I'm sure it'll be super popular because I'm sure it'll fit lots of people's criteria that collect United Airlines. On to the last pair of 777-300ERs, and they're both in the colours of Turkish Airlines. One's TC Juliet, and the other one's Juliet, Sierra. They both look effectively the same. We're in the standard scheme, though when you look closely at the artwork, one of them has a small dome towards the rear of the fuselage and a slightly different window pattern. Obviously, they've got different names as well, but otherwise they're the same. I mean, you have to be pretty eagle-eyed to spot the difference between these. I thought that there'd been quite a lot of Turkish 777-300s in this scheme made, but actually that's not true. NG have just started, and they made one last month wearing a special scheme, Champions League colours, so I can imagine there's going to be quite a few more of these coming because there are plenty of special schemes, annoyingly. But when you look for a standard scheme, the last time it was made was by Phoenix, and that was in 2015, and there's also a version by wittywings, which is shown its age now, isn't it? So that must have been, even before that must have been 2014 at the latest. So it's a long time since anyone's made a standard colours version. So that in itself, elevates these. I've said before I quite like the Turkish scheme with the tulip on the back, but I don't like it enough to make this supersonic. So I'm going to put one of these in high fly, and as with others where they've got duplicates, I'll put the other one in workhorse. Okay, now into the 787s, and they start with a familiar feel because we've got an all-Nippon 787. It's JA875 Alpha. It's wearing the Star Alliance colours. I struggle to get excited by all-Nippon at the best of times, but this one has been made previously by NG. They did JA872 Alpha in 2022, so not particularly exciting. It's obviously been made historically by Phoenix and jcwings as well, so there's plenty of these floating around, and this is kind of like a meh kind of model for me, so I'm going to workhorse this one. Next up though is a model which has got a couple of people excited. One of the people that is on the Model Airliner forum, he's a big fan of Korean Air, and he's pretty excited by this one. Far more excited than he probably deserves to be, because it's really not that interesting. But nonetheless, it's a Korean 787-10, HL8515, and to be fair, nobody else has made a Korean 787-10 in the scale, probably because I think it's a new aircraft for the airline. There are plenty of 9s, but no 10s. Obviously, the Korean scheme is classic, really a nice scheme, one I hope they never change. And this will be a lovely model, and no doubt pretty popular too. So for his sake, hopefully it's the first of a run of Koreans, but we'll have to see. I'm going to put this one up in supersonic. And joining it in supersonic, rather unbelievably, is the next model, which is a Saudia 787-10. It's HZAR32, wearing the retro classic scheme. It's been announced by jcwings, but again, for the future, and nobody else has made it. I guess it's the retro aspect which is charming me slightly, not the Saudi aspect. It will look great, I'm sure, in this scheme, and again, that kind of puts it up there to supersonic, despite my reservations that I've talked about before. And ending the Boeings, we have a white aeroplane. I moaned previously about white aeroplanes and how they don't interest me, and this one certainly doesn't. It's Boeing House Colours, 787-10, N8290V. It's wearing this Eco Demonstrator titles. That's about all it's wearing, really, because the rest of the livery is basically white. So yeah, really not interesting at all, and I'm going to put that one in the workhorse because it's just like meh, nothing on that one. That's such a cheap model to make. So that rounds up the Airbuses and the Boeings. There are, however, 4 Tupolevs this month, which is nice, but not as nice as it ought to be. And I guess this is where NG annoy me, because the choices here are not especially interesting, really. I think I've moaned about North Korea before. I guess so many airline models made for it. I guess partly because the Chinese have this connection with North Korea, which they shouldn't have, because the state shouldn't exist, because the whole place is just an enormous prison, and it's... Yeah, anyway, I'm not going there. But either way, this one, the first one, a T154B, P561, is wearing the colours of what I believe was called CAAK at the time, Choson Minhang. I'll butcher it. And basically it's the same livery as Air Koryu had initially, but with the CAAK titles in Korean. It'll be nice, but hey, there's like a million other T154s that I'd like released ahead of this one. So it's the sort of model I think I probably should get it, but yeah, it's really not exciting me. And do I really need it? I've got an Air Koryu one in effectively the same scheme already. I'm going to put it in the high flyer, but with some reservations. The next T154 is at least European, and this one is the colours of Tarom. It's YRTPB. It's another T154B, but it's wearing a pretty boring Tarom scheme, I have to admit. It's wearing this blue scheme they wore right at the, I'm not sure if it was even at the end of the 80s or just in the early 90s. It's a really kind of boring livery with just the big Tarom titles. I'd much prefer it if it had been more classic Tarom. Not a very interesting European 154 either, but again, one that I probably will get because it is unique. No one else has made it, I don't think, and it's nice enough. I'll put this one into high flyer as well. And we end models 29 and 30. We end in this review with a couple of TU214s, RA64506 and RA64505. They're both Russia State Transport Company. One's got the Russian flag, one's got the other kind of crest on the tail. Completely pointless models, in my opinion. It doesn't help that Panda have just released 4 Russia State Transport Company TU214s. None of them are exactly the same, I don't think. Maybe one of them is similar to one with the Russian flag on the tail. But who's buying all these Russia State Transport Company TU214s? I've seen some moaning from people saying, hey, where are the actual airline TU214s? And they're 100% right. Where are the airlines? Why are we getting so many of these bloody things, especially for the Russian state, which is obviously utterly contemptuous? So, yeah, I'm not impressed by this choice by NG. Sometimes they just don't seem to know what they're doing when it comes to picking models, and these two are a waste of time, and they're both going to go in gas guzzler, not because the mold's bad, but because I'm just sick of, you know, you barely get any TU204s, and when you get them, this is what you get. So it's a disappointing way to end the video, I would say. But as per usual, when you look across what's been made this month, you've got 30 models, which is a large number, and it's about half and half, I would say. About half of them are really good models with some strong validity. And, you know, the other half, in fact, I think it's 18 in the top two sections, and the other 12 sit around in workhorse. I don't really know why they exist, and I'd like NG to be making a much more interesting set. I also note that there's not a single 757 in this release set. There's not a single TriStar. It really seems like they're having big problems with the TriStar still, considering that those Saudi example has not been released yet. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not sure why they don't release more TriStars. Super frustrating, because they're probably the model that I'd like to see the most from NG, and it's beginning to really get on my nerves that they're not releasing more. Obviously, also we only see like one SP every few months, and that's not ideal either. So, yeah, there's plenty to complain about in terms of the diversity of mold usage and the lack of classics. But then when you look at what they are releasing, they're still making a wide range geographically, and for modern collectors, it surely should be happy days. There's something for most people here. You've got South American, you've got Middle Eastern, you've got Asian, you've got American, you've got some European, though not much in the way of European narrow bodies. So there's a good diversity, but kind of the same airlines still, and all a bit too modern, NG. Come on. Why can't we see this many classics? Anyway, that's it from me this month. Hope you enjoyed the video. It's been a bit of a quick one. I try to get through these big release videos. I don't think people want to hear me waffle on too much. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. That's it from yesterday's Airlines. Goodbye.